Hi, and welcome back to Act on Mental Health. My name is Sean Hardy, and I'm a licensed mental health counselor based here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And on this channel, I help people learn acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT. So, whether you're a therapist using ACT with clients, or your client yourself, or someone who wants help with their mental health struggles, or if you're a graduate student and you're wondering if ACT is the right therapeutic modality for you, this channel is for you. Now, we've been in a 10-session protocol over the last several videos that I'm calling the ACT Roadmap. And this has an accompanying resource that you can download that's both for therapists and clients to use. Uh, and you can find that on my website, seanhardy.com/resources. And I think that this is something that can help you get a lay of the land, kind of know your way around ACT and its 6 core processes. Each of the sessions fits into 3 phases. And so phase 1 is in session 1 and 2, and we talk about acceptance and letting go of the struggle with control and the control agenda. And then we talk about cognitive diffusion, like how we are not our thoughts, but we are separate from them, and getting that distance away from our thoughts. In phase 2, which is sessions 3, 4, and 5, we talk about contact with the present moment, how we use mindfulness and training our attention to stay in the here and now, because the only time we can act is in the present moment. And then we talk about the observing self, how there is a observer to our experience, and that is not our thoughts, not our feelings, or anything that's happening in us. It's kind of like that cup, that we are not the contents of the cup, but we are the cup itself, or the chessboard. We're not the pieces, but we are the chessboard, or the larger context. And then we did the ACT matrix, which kind of is a simple diagram that helps us kind of plot out all these different processes and all these different parts of our experience. And it's something you can refer back to help a client know in a situation if we're going toward their values or away. Then we go to phase 3, which is really talking about willingness as a master skill, how it's different than trying, how we need to be willing to have the experiences and go towards what matters. When we talk about clarifying and deepening values, we use some metaphors and exercises to help, such as passengers on the bus metaphor. And then we talk about committed action. And that's where we get to the nitty gritty and really flesh out what it looks like to take simple actions and commit to those. So we talk about the STAR of awareness and the SMART goals in that framework. Today's session is session 9, and this is in the engage phase, but this is really something you can introduce earlier on. I find with some clients that struggle with depression, or really or have harsh critical parts of them. So maybe even in the passenger of the bus metaphor, they might have a critic that's really loud, that's offered a lot of negative and self-defeating thoughts. So I find they really struggle with having self-compassion. And so this session really focuses on helping to cultivate that. For some, it's a new relationship with themselves. And this isn't about feeling sorry for yourself or trying to generate false compassion, but it's acting as if you're a friend to yourself. It's acting as if you love yourself and you're treating yourself as somebody that you love and care about. And so for some clients, they may need this earlier on. And so the goal of this session is to not become some saint or perfect in your kindness towards yourself, but to learn to respond to yourself in a way that keeps you moving forward toward what matters. It's not to get hung up on what you didn't do right. So you're moving from I failed, so there's something wrong with me, to I struggled and I can choose my next step. I can choose how I respond. And so this kind of helps clients to stay in the game and not succumb to being stuck in that depressive or harsh place. So some of the targets here for ACT processes is we're really gearing in to the psychological flexibility part of it, which all 6 core processes feed into, but we're really helping them to get flexible in their thinking. And sometimes when we fail or that critic shows up, we become rigid and we don't really respond in ways that move us toward the values that we have. So we want to remain flexible, and this helps clients to do that in the moment by offering themselves some self-compassion. Now, I will say for some clients, particularly men, or if there's clients who are avoidant, or maybe they don't trust people, this is really hard for them sometimes to buy into the need to have self-compassion. So you're not really trying to talk them into this, but you're trying to help them add a new dimension in how they treat themselves. And so they might think it's kind of girly or feminine or weak, and just kind of don't get too hung up on those kind of excuses if those come up. Simply kind of hold those and say, hey, we're going to go into this, and I just want you to be open-minded with how this might help you to keep going and keep moving forward. Yeah. So you can say something like, committed action isn't just a straight line. Sometimes you're going to have those barriers show up, and you need some sort of way to interact with yourself to help yourself get back up and keep moving. And so this is a really unnecessary thing to have. For me, I might throw in some personal anecdotes, like at raising kids. Every kid goes through that phase where they go from reliance and dependence on their caregiver to becoming more self-sufficient. And for me, I remember watching my son in the backyard through the window. He was I think about 3 years old, and he's in our backyard, and I was watching him, and he's about to go out there, and he fell, and my heart kind of jumped. I'm like, oh, I got to go out there and get him. But then I saw him cry a little bit, and he brushed off his knees and then got back up to play. And in that moment, I realized, man, my little boy's not going to need me every step of the way. And so there are times in our life where we become more self-sufficient. And self-compassion is a way to give us what our parents or others are not able to. Maybe we're wanting that, but they're not always able to move towards action when we're hurt or need some encouragement. So this is a way that we can do this for ourselves. Now, often there's a harsh, critical part to us. There's a negative, very judgmental part of us that's constantly evaluating and making judgments about everything we do. And it's this part that tends to discourage us, tends to get us distracted. And so self-compassion can help create a different kind of atmosphere. Now, the way that I describe this is through a metaphor of the ice caves. Now, I have a personal experience of walking to the ice caves in near Chatham, Michigan, and I think it's called Eben. And it's about a half mile there through the snow. And we got there, and there's this cave, like a waterfall kind of thing, but it's all iced up. And I remember being there and looking up and just seeing these long, like 3 or 4 foot icicles just hanging from there, knowing that if they drop, and I am done. And for the EMTs to get out there, it would take them a while to get to this remote place that we were at. But I remember sitting in that cave with surrounded by all this ice that had formed over the winter. And I was thinking about just how this reflection, it felt a lot like that inner critic that can be very cold and sharp and pointed and hostile. And it kind of put me in a tense spot where it was hard to move. And I used that as kind of a metaphor for that harsh criticism that we have. Now, one of my kids was talking with me about this, and I said, this ice cave has a lot of ice right now, but in the summer it becomes a beautiful waterfall, and it becomes completely changed. And I remember reflecting on that often compassion, self-compassion can do the same, that it's really creating a temperature that we live in. So if we have this overly harsh, critical part of us, we could become cold, pointed, and can become a very dark, gloomy place. But if we can cultivate this self-compassion, it has a way of warming us up, and it can create something beautiful there. So there's ways we can help clients to come in contact with this. So I would encourage you to find a creative metaphor that might help them to grab a hold of this concept. So one of the key things in the teaching is that compassion is not letting yourself off the hook, but it's keeping yourself on the path. It's keeping yourself focused and moving toward what matters. And so it functions as a refocusing part of us. To be able to help clients to get in contact with what it means to have self-compassion, I like to do a simple experiential exercise called treating yourself like a friend. So there's 3 questions. And before I start, I prompt them and I say, well, when was a recent moment where you were very critical of yourself, that you treated yourself very harshly? And so it might be something that happened today, this week, last month. Maybe you have to go back even further. But I'd like them to get into contact with a moment where they were really hard on themselves. Maybe they had a lot of those self-defeating thoughts. And so I'll ask them 3 questions. The first question I'll ask is, what did you say to yourself in that moment? Now, for negative clients, like those who are depressed or have that harsh, critical part of them, this is often where you see them very creative. They will list probably 8 to 12 things that they said to themselves in that moment. When you ask them, maybe what are some good things you can say to yourself, they might struggle to think creatively. They may only say maybe 2 strengths that they have. All right, but when you ask them what they said, they're probably going to list several things that they said to themselves. So that's the first question. The second question I would ask is, if a close friend of yours was in the same situation that you were in, what would you say to them? Now here it would be nothing like what they said to themselves. They would probably say something like, everybody has a bad day. Circumstances were out of your control. Hey, you have a lot of things going for you. Hey, don't let this stop you from doing what matters to you. They probably think of 8 to 12 things that they would have said that would be positive and encouraging and helpful. And so that's the second question. Then the final question is, what would change if you spoke to yourself the way that you speak to a friend? And that it probably gets them kind of thinking a little bit. And I think the epiphany that comes to them is they would keep moving forward. They wouldn't get so discouraged. They would find themselves looking at what they have versus what was taken from them. They would keep moving toward what matters to them. So functionally, having a friend and treating yourself like a friend helps you to keep moving forward. And so that's the importance of having self-compassion. A homework assignment that I would give them is to try this simple exercise called going for a may I walk to practice self-compassion. So I would go through this with them in the session and teach them on what they would do. And I would actually have them do this right after the session if they have time, even if it's as simple as they walk to their vehicle. But going for a may I walk to practice this self-compassion. So the May I Walk trains the client to have present moment awareness and to have that openness to experience of acceptance, and also to practice their values. So helping them in real time to connect to their values. So this is how it works. First, I'm going to have them pause and before they head out on their walk, and put their hand on their chest like this and say, "May I be gentle with myself." And then I'll have them begin to walk slowly and notice their surroundings. The third thing as they're walking is, as they see things and things come to mind, to quietly or silently say, "May I," or "May this," and start to think of it like you're blessing or you're extending compassion towards it. So it could be like, "May this tree remain steady and firm. May that car get to its destination safe. May this street have peace." It's pronouncing a open and blessed may I, or may this. The fourth is, when your mind gets loud, include yourself in the blessing. May Sean be full of peace. May Sean have contentment. May I be full of health. And the final thing is, you end with, "May I carry this gentleness forward. May I remain compassionate towards myself." Now, you can do it in a variety of ways, but it's a simple walk that you do with reciting a blessed phrase or a phrase of blessing. May I, or may this. So try it out. Have them try it out and see how that changes and shifts their experience. Now, this might be a good, after you've done the passengers on the bus, to bring that back into the session and say, "You remember the passengers on the bus? What were some of your main passengers that were very loud?" And they'll start to name a few of them. "I remember you talking a lot about that harsh critic. And I remember, some of the things that were said. But the thing I remember was that you stopped your vehicle, you stopped your life to argue it. And how arguing it never ended with either side being right. So if you can't win against that passenger, maybe you can reparent the passenger." So we talk about, what if you saw yourself as the parent to this passenger? Maybe you're bringing your kid along for the ride. How would you treat that passenger? So I got a couple kids at home. I'm thinking of them as I do this. And I would think like how I would treat them would be different than how I would treat myself. So it's a way to help teach them, what skill do they need that they don't have? And this is where you can start to gently reframe that by reparenting the passengers. So you might say something like, if one of your loudest passengers were a scared child, how might you respond differently? So giving them just a simple reframe can help them to generate some compassion for that thought or that passenger, which is really a part of themselves, right? They're the container, and that's the content. So those are just some ideas to help bring this home. The ultimate aim here is flexibility, especially after setbacks. With depressed clients, they may go through spurts of high motivation and low motivation. Same thing with anxious clients. They might start off really well and surrender and let go, but then get back into that control and wanting to control their experience. So those are setbacks in acceptance and commitment therapy. And so when those things happen, we don't need to beat ourselves up. We don't need to get down on ourselves and be critical or do better. But what we need is to get back up and keep trying. And so for us as therapists, if you're in that role, it's for us to also model compassion through our sessions, how we treat ourselves or how we treat them, but also how we treat ourselves. I love to bring myself to therapy. I say that all the time. I'm like, I'm going to bring myself to therapy here. And that means I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to be transparent with you. I'm going to allow some appropriate self-disclosure because I want them to know that we all struggle. And I want them to see how I handle my own struggles so that they can maybe learn something from that, glean something, and incorporate that in their life. Not that I'm perfect, but I think that there are some things that are easier caught than taught. So that's one of those tricks that I do. All right, so that's the end of this session. In the final session, session 10, we're going to look at consolidation and look at termination and how that kind of conversation goes. How we bring everything that they've learned into focus and where we leave it as we say our goodbyes or the see you laters. So thank you for joining me for this video. And remember, your journey towards a more purposeful and mindful life begins with a single click.